Lyndon, you know, I think even though it's been a really hard couple of years for us here, there is a sort of positive feeling around that, you know, people are upbeat, things are actually starting to get done, it seems.
Yeah, actually, things are starting to get done at my house. EQR turns up out of the blue and starts fixing our busted drains that we've been waiting for a couple of years, which really does give you a lift, you know.
Yeah.
As I'm sure it does around the city, as that starts to happen, as the new sewage goes in, you know, which is kind of naff but whack cool, you know, actually going to be great. And broadband as well, and that kind of thing. We're going to end up with a state-of-the-art city, and as frustrating as it is now, it is exciting to look ahead and think, it'll be wicked at some point, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I guess we do have to remember that we are at the 3-year mark, and we keep hearing that that is the hardest time for people who've been through a tragedy such as we have. And there are a lot of people who aren't feeling that way, you know? A lot of people are still struggling, and I think it's really important that we don't forget those as we kind of get caught up in the momentum.
Totally, yeah. Jared, you've been filming from the beginning. What have you seen?
Well, this is the last program in the series, and so we thought today we should look ahead at different ways of living, different sorts of communities, people getting together in new ways, new housing, more affordable housing. And we're also going to go overseas. We're going to meet some people who have been in calamities and who are a bit further down the road in their recovery, and maybe get some advice off them. And that's today in Christchurch from the Streets.
The work at the Earthquake Sport for us is just never ending. We hear people sort of saying, what are we complaining about over here in the east? But everybody's just so tired. God, it's almost too much for me.
Oh, was that?
It's okay, Jim. Not only are we supporting the community because it's our job, we've also got our own earthquake problems that people here don't even know about.
Yeah, good food.
Tell me about your breathing. How's your health?
Oh, up and down. Yeah.
Is the doctor pleased with you?
Well, I reckon if I get pneumonia, I'm going to be in trouble. Yeah, I've been getting out a wee bit.
Because remember last time you were scared to leave the house?
Well, I started going into the malls in about October last year. I had to go shopping for my son's wedding. But, so yeah, I finally started going into malls, but not often.
Aranui is one of the lowest economic areas.
Is it? So what's the biggest issue in Aranui?
Not enough housing. These housing New Zealand units are coming down, so everybody's been asked to move out of those houses.
I've just been informed that I have to move. I burst out crying. Yeah, I burst out crying. I'm trying to think, well, where am I going to go? What will I do? I've been here 17 years, you know, how am I going to move? I don't know, too much stuff and...
It's tough for them here.
Yeah.
Because the people in Aranui suffer through just being poor and living in this area, in some ways they have coped with this traumatic event better than some people that live in other areas of town. Oh, you got a nice smile. Okay. This is our new library, which was well in planning before the earthquake, and then the earthquake held it up. But we kept pushing and pushing the council because it was important for something good to be happening in Aranui.
It was great for the kids to come straight after school. They kind of utilised the library. And adult-wise as well, they're accessing it, so it's great. This is our community centre. It got closed down and has been for probably a good year and a half now.
We miss it a lot.
What's it been like for the workers, you guys? You're the workers. This is year 3. I hear it said that it's the hardest year of all.
Yeah, and I'd agree. Everybody's tired, aren't they?
While the rebuild is slow in the east, in the city, the pace is relentless.
What do you reckon, Lyndon? Inspiring step here, what property developers are up to in the city?
I hope we don't get too much of this kind of tilt slab, concrete, kind of strip mall, lean-to nightmare.
No, well, I don't think anyone wants that for Christchurch, do they? There are definitely lessons to be learned. We're better than to learn them from the cities that have already kind of gone through this recovery, right?
Yeah.
New Orleans, 8 years after Cyclone Katrina tore the place apart. A city whose people experienced disaster just a few years before Christchurch. It's not difficult to draw comparisons between the two places. Just like Christchurch, a change in circumstance was the catalyst for new ways of thinking. Local entrepreneur Robbie Vetrano has observed a city that's been turned on its head. New Orleans is now hailed as America's fastest growing city. Would this have happened without Katrina?
I don't think it would have happened this way, is probably the fairest thing to say. I think the necessary urgency and intensity were things that were all attributable to the strange set of just upside down circumstances that Katrina delivered upon the city. Economically, New Orleans left something to be desired. I think most people would admit to the fact that over the last 40 or 50 years, our economy had been in decline. We would sort of miss the boat. Whereas there's a great deal of pride in the identity of New Orleans, there wasn't a whole lot of participation in self-determination. For the first time, a group of people that were largely uninvolved and perhaps not really having much influence on the community, now we're sort of at the, involved in the meat of things. And it was all hands on deck, because you needed everyone to participate.
The new city's been rebuilt with an unprecedented amount of public involvement and scrutiny, a change that was pretty much unheard of before the catastrophe.
I mean, we talk about this being a democracy laboratory, but it's actually happening here in the messiest of ways, in the most probably democratic of ways. When the urban planning process began, it started with some very high-minded, very academic conversations. Again, well-intentioned, but probably misplaced and probably a poor choice of timing. But what resulted from that, both the good and bad of that, was that we essentially opened up the process to every man, woman, and child in the city. And they organized in one large room and divided the city into zones and invited citizens to come in and to actively participate in the process that said, where do you want your church? Where do you want your school? What sort of improvements would you like to see in the street, in the municipal projects? What sort of things do you consider to be a priority? So each of those groups were facilitated by very, very skilled urban planners and architects. And then their job was to assemble that, to assimilate that, and report on the desires of the neighborhood, and to put that into a plan that had to be ratified. For the first time, I think the notion or the act of civic engagement is far better understood, and I think there's far more peer pressure on people to participate. So the idea of populating boards with good involved people that are taking those responsibilities seriously. These aren't ceremonious positions, that there's work to be done and you have actual responsibility. So now it's just not the network news coming in and asking the questions. Now citizens are really armed with the tools and the engagement to come in and scrutinize these processes, be it a local school board or being something as big as our police department.
New Orleans is now rated the third most popular destination for Ivy League graduates. Before Katrina, it was 46th. And another city that's always popular is San Francisco. So we enlisted the help of urban designer James Lundy to see just why that is.
Just a few hundred metres from the Golden Gate Bridge, there's a suburb called Marina. It's built on that, it's built on sand, and it suffered greatly in the 1989 earthquake. They rebuilt, they refurbished, and the same community is living in there. They don't get any insurance here, but they choose to live here.
And you'll notice the street mapping here is a lot different than the rest of the city. It's not a grid.
Yeah.
It was meant to be a community of its own.
You're not worried if another earthquake happened again here?
We live in California. People live in Tornado Alley in the Midwest. People live in hurricane states. Yeah, here we have earthquakes.
Yeah. So it's just what you live with?
Yeah.
I mean, this is the future. Not to keep sprawling the city, but condense the city. Why don't we reduce the size of the city by a third? And then we might actually get something happening. We're in Little Italy. It's now called North Beach. We're actually in an urban village. There's the church right in Little Italy. That's the place that Joe DiMaggio married Marilyn Monroe. It's actually a foundation stone of this community. Columbus Street here is one of the main collectors. It separates one part of Little Italy from another part of Little Italy. So it's slightly a barrier. But we just walk up 1 or 2 blocks up here and we're right into the residential heart of San Francisco. You might notice this is the community's main street. Everything a person needs in this area. This is like a major artery but for the community. It's narrow, it's got on-street parking, and you'll notice all the residential streets feed down to it so people can walk here. This is a real walking community. You might notice something else. There's no subways, no McDonald's, no supermarkets, no Walmarts. Do you enjoy living here?
I do, yes.
Yeah. They don't value money, they value people and ideas here and creativity. All the shops have got apartments over them, so you've got people living right in the street, right here, on-street parking, cars can't go fast, the pedestrians rule, the pedestrians actually control this space. All the streets that head out of this main street, they're all residential.
We've only walked 50 metres.
We're only 50 metres from the main collector. The pavements are really only there to stop the cars from hitting the buildings. They're not there for people. People walk in the middle of the road. They're not a place that you want to go through to get somewhere else, but they're an easy little way to walk between neighbourhood street from neighbourhood street. This is how you build an urban village. This is the second most dense city after New York in America, but this is quality living. And isn't that what we should be doing, is trying to create things and draw from everywhere and pull it together into something that nobody could imagine.
This is my business.
We love New Zealand.
So this has got a longevity. I love places where you can go back after having wandered the world for 30 years and your favourite cafe is still there. You're sitting and it's like you've never been away. That is a community. The place that you come home to, your Tauranga Waiwai. We don't have enough of them in New Zealand and we've got to create more of them.
It's an ideal that's a long way from how we so often build in New Zealand.
This is a dormitory suburb. People come here to sleep, then they go and work all day, then they come back here to sleep. It's too far from schools for the kids to walk or cycle, so they have to be driven to school. You have to drive to shops, you have to drive to work. There's no employment here. There's nothing but housing. There is nothing wrong in many ways with the houses. And look at this. This is a good suburb. But what I'm saying is we shouldn't be building suburbs, we should build communities. The best room in the house, 36 square metre room, is the double garage. What's wrong with a good 2-storey house and have a decent garden? Look at that house in the corner. There is no garden. This is not an inspirational environment. How many novels are written here? How many paintings are done here? None, probably.
What could be done with this bit of land, Jim?
Well, even having some play equipment for children. You know, a couple of barbecues, you know, some, you know, vegetable gardens. This harps back to the wonderful dream that New Zealanders had of the quarter-acre paradise. But that quarter-acre has shrunk now to 450 and 500 square metres, and the house takes up the whole quarter-acre. To me, there's a bigger challenge, not just about building differently, it's how do you create a more enriched community that isn't indebted. If we can free people up from that debt, what an amazing society we could have.
We are an unequal society. We're getting more of an equal society, and housing developments tend to encourage that process rather than try to redress the balance. And also our understanding of what we wanted out of a house and what we wanted out of a community has changed, and more particularly how you interact with your neighbours and how you use the neighbourhood. This is a property which demonstrates what we're trying to achieve. We're driving past what is going to be a heritage park, which will include both the old buildings and the stables here.
Are you well?
We've got to get the development mix right for all sectors of our society, rather than simply one end of society. Anyone can make a good community with wealthy people, but for people who don't have a lot of money, it's about affordability. Hi, fella. Development now requires good urban design, both at the house and in terms of the public space. What we're looking at is linear parks, which you can actually engage with or access off your home. So,
you walk out your door?
You walk out your front door, across a small lane, into the park. And so we would like to think that 50% of all our houses will essentially gain access directly onto a park. And
That's 50% of that?
50% of all houses.
Wow.
And your garage is on your own property, so it's access way only. We talked about community at the beginning. What is community? Community is engaging with your local environs, and so access to your park, which is right outside your door, access to living streets where you can walk down the street freed from cars, and you've got places in the public space where you can have barbecues, play area, all those things. That makes community. Because guess what you're doing all the time? You're interacting with people.
You're banging into others.
You're banging into your neighbours. The essential component is smaller houses, but better quality. By having smaller sites, you can charge less, in the region of about $380,000 to $420,000. That opens up the market to a far bigger audience than it would otherwise be. You don't necessarily know what the total cost of the development's going to be. All we know is we're going to be building to a far higher quality than we would otherwise have done in the past. Now you've got here a play area. Over here you've got a basketball, hoops and skate park, so a different age group. Over here you might have community gardens, paid for by the developer. The challenge that we set of a new subdivision in Christchurch is going to be to achieve that, and we think we're up to it.
It's a pretty steep hill, Rach.
It certainly is. I used to come climbing up here all the time. There's a beautiful track that used to come out from the farm here on the left. You go up the crag.
You go actually further. This was just not enough for you, just the actual hill itself.
I had no idea there was even a gated community in Littleton until friends of mine actually bought some land in here.
Yeah, I used to walk past here with my dog and wonder, why? Why have gates up here for? But then, you know, post-quake, power cuts, gates become useless. Apparently the residents had a vote and decided, leave them open.
Yeah.
So that's a pretty cool outcome.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Where we want to live and what we want to live in are often very personal choices, something architectural guru Mike Reynolds knows only too well.
I went to architectural school in the University of Cincinnati, took all the architectural courses, got my degree, and I began right then to think that architecture, as it stood then, was worthless.
What's happened here?
Just called Citizens Initiative, number one, rebuild Christchurch. We had 25 in the workshop, then 30, then 35. We've ended up with 40 and 100 on the waiting list.
Looks like we have enough for 2 more courses, so let's get this one on and capped and looking level with the other one also.
Mike Reynolds, fan of his Earthship House. There's a guy out there with the sunglasses and the beard and the fair hair. And he said, why don't you come to Christchurch and talk about this kind of stuff?
Can we have a bit of a yak to you?
Yeah.
Are you surprised by the interest?
No, because we're seeing it in every country. It's like wherever we do this, 50 people, really 100 people want to come and help us, and we can only use about 40. It's radical to be building with garbage, but when you really look at it, these are great byproducts that are too good to throw away.
These are bottle bricks, end of a bottle, cut and taped together. So actually kind of making stained glass windows. So when these bottles are clean on both sides, the sun will shine through and you'll just have walls that will just be these beautiful circles of colour.
It does have tyres, doesn't it? Tell us a wee bit about the construction.
The building is built with automobile tyres rammed with earth because that's thermal mass. And it happens to be very good in compression. And it happens to not rot. It happens to not, termites don't want it. It's earthquake resilient. I mean, there's so many good things about it, and we have literally billions and billions of tires on the planet. So it's a much better thing to use than trees all the way around.
Is it true they have no heating, no cooling?
They stay right around 21 with no fuel, summer or winter. The shape is a U shape with tires pounded and laid like bricks. And then it has a bond beam, and then it has a bird cage of steel with very thin cement. So even in an earthquake, if it cracked, it wouldn't cave in.
We've had a fantastic response with just businesses, Fulton Hogan, Texaco, Fenwick's. They've just turned up and Wholesome Cement, just given us the materials we need. They've been amazing.
We have a problem here in that building costs are above what a lot of people can afford.
Housing costs too much. There's many reasons for that, but one of the major reasons is regulations and codes and the red tape you have to go through to do a conventional home.
Yeah.
You know, when you say I want to build a building out of tires, they freak out, you know. But when they see a demonstration building, then anybody that knows construction can look at it and say, this is pretty substantial.
Good to see that.
It's nice to do some tasking that's creative, you know, it's not all straight lines.
Do you have any information about how feasible it would be here?
Well, we're thinking that from what we've seen, that it is going to be permittable.
This is kind of historic because this is the first Mike Reynolds community earthship structure that's been built. It's not for everybody, but it's getting people thinking about what's possible.
With so many buildings being demolished, it's easy to become defeatist, you know. At times it's felt pretty smash happy.
Well, so much has gone. Imagine what Auckland or Wellington would look like if we demolished 3/4 of their city centres.
Fortunately, there are passionate people who have and still are fighting tooth and nail to preserve some of our most beloved heritage buildings.
Every morning, up to 100 tradesmen turn up this site. It's the Arts Centre, and their restoration is said to be the largest building restoration project currently being undertaken anywhere in the world. Well, I arranged to meet project leader Andre Lovett early one morning outside the back wall of the old Academy Cinema.
This is where the Academy was. This is the remnant wall of the boys' high swimming pool, which was constructed in the 1880s. There's lots of urban mythology about the swimming pool. There's some suggestion that it was dug out by boys on detention before the school actually moved to this site, but I'm not sure about any of that.
You seem quite young to have this job, Andre.
You're as old as you feel, my mother says. So this is where you would have come in and you bought your tickets on the right and your tangy fruits.
Yeah. Have you come for this job?
I'm from Christchurch.
So you remember the Arts Centre?
The Arts Centre is a place from my childhood. It's where my wife and I went out. You know, our first place was a movie in the Academy and coffee at the cafes. And for me, one of the beautiful things about this space is that skylight and the ability to express that now. All of this work here is placement of reinforcement steel, which will make the concrete strong and robust in future earthquakes. It's really about upgrading these buildings now for the next generation.
Was the future of this place ever in doubt after the quakes?
There was definitely concern about timing and about money. I mean, we still have major concerns with respect to money, but we've made a decision to crack on with the money that we have and get on with it.
Did we lose any buildings that we didn't want to lose?
The most substantial collapse was the observatory tower, and that was catastrophic collapse.
Is it going to be replaced?
Yes, yeah.
We're losing nothing?
That's the idea. You know, our ultimate strategy is that if we need to leave something for a little bit longer and raise the funds to do that, then we will. This is what's known as the engineering additions building. It's where the The court too was, and upstairs was the rehearsal area for the court. The damage that this building and the neighbouring buildings within this block has received is amongst the worst damage. But yeah, 290 million is our working budget. We've got funds of 170. Most of that was comprised of insurance, which was a fantastic position for the Arts Centre to be in. But our future will involve fundraising, taking cost out of our rebuild program, and doing things like the gymnasium, trying to get back in the business of being a landlord and having some rental money coming through the till.
So you're going to end up with a $120 million mortgage? Maybe?
Well, I'm still very optimistic that we're going to be able to do what we need for the money that we've got now and that we can fundraise. There's been a substantial amount of international interest around potential donations from philanthropic sources.
It's going to be better than it was.
It's going to be fantastic.
Le Caf?
Yeah. So, bit different, eh?
That's all new concrete there.
Yep. Even though the building doesn't look great, it's a lot more robust as a result of having that work done. When you see how much stone and rock fell off the buildings, and you consider it was lunchtime and people sitting outside and moving around the buildings, it's
beggars belief, doesn't it?
It's staggering actually that no one was more badly hurt. This is College or Great Hall, turned 130 last year, would you believe? Built for the princely sum of $600,000 in today's dollars, and we're spending $36 million on the restoration of this area. All of this was designed by Benjamin Mountford, the provincial architect at the time, and Mountford's very significant and famous for many things in the city, including the provincial chambers. This is acknowledged as one of his masterpieces, but during its construction it was actually delayed by two things that are really familiar with us, or to us. One was earthquakes, and the second thing was lack of money.
Nothing changes.
Bernard behind you here is undertaking a really critical part of the restoration process, and that he's one of the heritage carpenters on site and taking care of the removal of all of that.
A lot of panelling behind us here.
Yep, Kari Rimu. That's been taken off and numbered and stored.
You're taking all the panelling off?
No, just where it needs to be taken off. But we're trying to leave as much as we can because obviously, the less damage, the better.
There's a big window missing up there.
Yeah, the memorial window. So that was taken out and is safe and undamaged and being restored by Graham Stewart in North Lowburn at the moment. But thankfully we got our window out in time, and in fact there are other windows around the site that were preserved.
I've heard that it's going to take 50 years, I've heard 20 years, I've heard all sorts of things. Is it possible to estimate?
Yeah, 2019 is my objective.
Is that right?
Yep.
It's our finest thing, isn't it?
I love it.
Do you reckon?
I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
It's funny, Rachel, I get it, I think we all get it here that, people outside the city are tiring of hearing our earthquake stories.
Yeah, but I guess, if telling these stories makes us feel better and helps us heal, then it's got to be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, New Zealand Air. We couldn't have done it without you.